So, hello and welcome to the touchdown of Pandemic Airways Flight 2020. We are now touched down on the tarmac. We are taxiing across to the gantry so that we can disembark. Please make sure that you take all of your luggage with you, and we are looking forward to seeing you on your ongoing journeys, and we will all meet up in U's curious saloon and inestimable reading room in the future, I'm sure. So this is the final of the 55, 56 videos that we've been conducting throughout the lockdown period of the pandemic of early 2020. We've discussed all sorts of things between us. We've discussed the Tree of Life, we've discussed tarot, the Inistry system, the Western esoteric Inistry system that I particularly teach. And so what I'd like to do this evening is I've got a couple of questions to answer that weren't answered earlier on, so I'm going to answer a couple of the questions, and I'm going to just quickly go back over the Tree of Life and a few important things to take forward if you want to study the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah, particularly what use is it. I really want to finish by pointing out the practical use of some of these things so that we use our tarot to engage life and not escape it, which has always been the tagline for the approach to tarot that we take with Tarosophy. I wanted to point out a few signposts and maybe a few things in the gift shop for you. They're courtesy of Michael Rapino. There is a wonderful gift memento for you to take away that is in U's Saloon. You'll find it as you walk into U's Saloon. If you don't know what U's Saloon is, then I'll put it in the links again, and we'll occasionally mention it in the Tarot Association group as well. So what else? And I have a final piece of bedtime story for you. Now, I was laughing earlier because Tony Forsyth had very kindly asked for one final last bedtime story, and it is perhaps not the story you want, but maybe it's the story we deserve. I have a particularly powerful, profound, dense piece of work by one of my favourite writers, and I'm going to try and do it justice by reading it to you. It is 10 minutes long, but it is about farewells, and it's about finishing. It's very important to do finishings correctly. It's very important to do endings correctly, because when I used to have young kids visit, relatives and things like that, and they used to enjoy sort of playing at the cottage and things like that where I was living at the time, and they used to hate going home because they had the woods to play in, and a magician's cat and lots of books around and all sorts of things. And I used to say, well, you've got to go now. And they'd sort of like wipe their tears away, and I'd say, because if you don't go now, how can you come back? And most of the time I'd get away with that. So that is the case. We have onward journeys to get on with, and we will all remember this time a little bit more fondly, I hope, than we might have otherwise done. And it's been a learning experience for me. And we will have our saloon to just take the pace down a little bit and have plenty of time, and know that we are not on a fixed time journey, and we can have time to get to know each other over there as well. Okay then, so a couple of the questions. First of all, I'll deal with the Tree of Life because someone asked about that. Just to quickly go back over the main model, and We could go back over the main model, which I will do so, but I also want to talk about why it's important, I think, to learn the Tree of Life and perhaps how to start learning it in a reasonable way. Someone had asked about the chakra system as well, and strangely enough, it's come up in the group a few times. It's come up in, bizarrely enough, at exactly the same time in our private Crucible Club and Order of Everlasting Day groups as well. It must be something in the air, but it strikes me that perhaps because a lot of people tend to go to the East for Eastern traditions, for example, yoga and Kundalini work and chakras and meditation and so forth, quite often they entirely bypass the Western esoteric history system that is fundamental to our Western approach to things. And there's an academic argument about dividing East and West, but let's just ignore that for the moment. And then when they get opportunity to perhaps get some new teaching with the Kabbalah and the Tarot and find that it might be a little bit more accessible and more powerful and more applicable than they thought, then they try, and people sometimes try and take that smattering of Eastern knowledge and use it as we always do. We use the information that we have to make sense of any new teaching. And as a result, they then ask, oh, okay, so I've studied the chakras or something else in the Eastern systems for a while. How does that fit with what I'm now learning? And it behoves me to say that it's really important to learn one system at a time before you try and make correspondences between them. Because correspondences work on attributes. You have to know the attributes of one system to make in context the same attribute and mapping correspondingly in the context of another system. And it could be that one thing in one system is drawn in one place and another thing is drawn in another place, but in the context of the whole systems, they're identical places. And so it's important to know both systems comprehensively before you try and marry them together. And to some extent, it isn't important to know where the chakras are on the Tree of Life, because quite often that sort of work is totally irrelevant. An old friend of mine was once sort of reading a lot of books about a particular subject, and I visited their house once, and I looked at all of these books everywhere, and I said, but what are you going to do when you finish reading it all? Because the question is how does this make you a different person? How does it deepen your engagement with the world? How does it affect your philosophy, which is a living philosophy? We are, most of all, what we do, not what we say, not what we think, but what we do. And therefore, if you spend 10 years mapping the chakras or crystals to the Tree of Life, then so what? What does it actually mean? What does it mean? And I think things do need to be somewhat applicable in the systems that we're learning. So yes, learn the Tree of Life, but learn it as a way of modeling spiritual life, initiatory life, the practice of magic, relationships, your relationship to the divine. Perhaps learn it in order to remember the tarot cards and use it as a way of interpreting tarot cards for real readings for your own life and other people's. Do all of that. By all means, it's well worth it. And that's all I'd say about the tree. But I also think that you should be able to, if I can find a bit of paper, when you start learning Kabbalah, just practice with the really basic, simple stuff first. which is the tree of life, the Sephiroth, the paths, learning their names, of not being able to find a blank piece of paper when I need it. This is why you can tell that this is authentic, because it's not necessarily planned. But if you have, I'm cheating slightly because I can see a tree of life underneath it. I need an absolutely blank piece of paper. There we go, let's do that one. Okay, so right, one blank piece of paper. You need to be able to quickly draw out a tree of life to learn it. Then you need to be able to draw the paths on it, like so. I think that's all of them. So be able to draw the paths on it. You then need to know all of the names, all the way from Keitha down to Malkuth. You need to be able to spell those in Hebrew, even write them in Hebrew if you want. Then you need to know the tarot cards on each of the paths and the Hebrew letters for each of those. So if I just take these as examples, so our middle ladder is the Tower, Strength, and the Empress, and so you need to be able to know how to map those to each other. You need to know the numbers of the Sephiroth and their Hebrew spellings as well. And most importantly, and this is something we teach in the Crucible Club and in the Order of Everlasting Day, always map your experience to the model. Always test the model by mapping your experience to it. So someone asked in the Facebook group when I asked for questions, Diane DeMarco, who's in the group at the moment. That's excellent. So you'd asked, if love is the answer, what is the question? Well, any question, any situation, any ministry thing, any magical work, any spiritual work, any biography, as we've read with Dafri John, if you read his Knee of Listening, then you can map that to the Tree of Life. Bernadette Roberts, Irina Tweedy, St. Bonaventure, Catherine, and so on. All of the saints, mystics, St. John of the Cross, of course, Thomas à Kempis, the Imitation of Christ, all of these things will map to the Tree of Life. And so if someone said to me, if love is the answer, what is the question? Well, I would look at love, which is mercy or loving kindness, on the Tree of Life, which is the Sephira of Hesed, number 4 here. So that's Hesed, meaning mercy or loving kindness. And as we know from the initiatory system of going up the Tree of Life, that's the last of the Sephiroth before the abyss here, that the initiate crosses in order to merge fully with the divine up at the top here. And so the grade that is attributed to this is called Adeptus Exemptus, because this is someone who leaves all of their luggage behind in order to cross the abyss. And there is nothing left on the other side of that, and that is why the grade is called Adeptus Exemptus, because they are now exempt from all attachment. So we can answer the question that Diane posed Kabbalistically, and perhaps for real, that love, if that is the answer, then the question is very simple. It is, I'll write it here, is what remains. What remains? Love is the only thing that remains, because love is here and it's the last thing before the crossing of the abyss. So we can answer a question, no matter how deep, profound, complex, spiritual, psychological, magical or mystical, by just knowing the map of the tree of life. And then we can also look at the Lover's card, which you won't be surprised to realise is on the path here between Bina and Tifreth, between understanding and beauty. So Bina is understanding, Bina, and Tifreth means beauty. So the Lover's card is the understanding of beauty when the Adeptus Exemptus has become the master of the temple. And so the only thing that remains at this point is love. And then from here, they now have a very different view of love, because they are now unified with the divine at the top of the tree and seeing the beauty of the whole system from above the abyss. So instead of it being a state, it's now a lesson that they've learnt, because they've transitioned from this point to this point. Okay, so it's just to point out that you can use the tree of life, as a model for any particular situation, system, and you test it. You make sure that that makes sense, that that card does make sense, that if it was the Hierophant, then it would be a different sort of teaching, and perhaps there's a misunderstanding in the model, the map, your experience, if it doesn't fit that system. So you're constantly testing your experience with the system itself. So rather than go through the whole Tree of Life and the Kabbalah, I prefer that you read the various books, like the Magician's Kabbalah, for example, is one. If you want to start basically, then the Andrea Green book, A Step-Up Guide to Kabbalah, is a little bit more basic and also uses the tarot to get into it. And of course, we recommend all sorts of books further to that in the Crucible Club and the Order of Everlasting Day. Now, Michael had also asked, and hello to Seb, Michael had also asked about darker decks, themed decks, and so on. And I just had a bit of a story to respond to that, really, which is the darkest deck that I have is the Heindel deck, but that is primarily because when I purchased it, it was at a car boot sale here in England many years ago, and I was walking around and I was surprised to see in a box at the back of a car, like a garage sale if you like, all of these tarot decks, some of which I had, but a lot of them I didn't, and they were just loads of tarot decks, and they all seemed to be generally themed, but I wasn't quite sure in what way. And I was looking through them, and then I noticed that in the rest of the box there were other objects and books, and they were all things like survivalist books, how to grow your own food, sort of how to build a bunker, how to shoot a rifle, a lot of history of Nazi Germany, and so on. And I got this really, and the guy was stood there and he said, oh, I bought that whole box from some auction or something. And I did believe him. He did have a lot of different boxes that he'd obviously bought from different places. I didn't think it was his, and he didn't look like the sort to be a right-wing survivalist into tarot. But of course, the Heindel deck the person probably bought because it's got the runes on it, and this person was very much into, I guess, Germanic and Nordic lore. Let's just put it like that in the most polite way possible. And so that deck. Oh, and hello to Simon as well. I hope you're doing very well, Simon, and that the guitar making's going well. It's been quite a while since we talked. So yeah, it was very much like shudder, but that deck for me has a lot of history to it as a deck itself, and of course the person who bought it had put a lot of energy into it. And so even though I did a sort of banishing, I did try and consolidate the energy into something more positive. So that deck is a very dark deck for me. I only use it. It also has Native American references. It's a bonkers deck in my opinion, but it does have one of my favorite cards of all time. The Chariot card in that deck, for some reason, just blows me away. There's something in that card that is one of my favorite pieces of artwork out of any deck that I've ever seen. Just me personally, it just has some resonance for me. But yeah, so that for me is a very dark deck, and I use it for very dark readings. But someone I knew used to use the Hello Kitty deck and the Gummy Bear Tarot for really, really dark readings, really profound, deep psychological readings about abuse and about childhood trauma and all sorts of other things. And they actually applied that, both the Gummy Bear deck and the Hello Kitty deck, that was their deck of choice. And you know, I've seen sort of very pretentious people who put on a black jacket, grow a goatee beard, buy a few Crowley books, and then do really dark shadow side Tree of Life on the evil Clipothic side using the Deviant Moon deck and so on. And basically it's just you know, the lightest, fluffiest thing that you can possibly think of, because they're not really being authentic with that. So I think it's down to your connection with the deck and your purposing of the deck as to whether something is dark or light or good or evil or whatever. It's called the Heindel deck. Just answering there, I'll spell it there. Heindel Tarot. It comes with a couple of books. I think Rachel Pollack wrote them. That's it. Cool, thanks. Yeah, so if that answers Michael's question, there are sort of dark side things. Again, if you read the book The Lost Envoy, which is about Austin Osman Spare's tarot deck, which was basically a cartomantic deck. Now, Austin Spare was the guy who thought that, Aleister Crowley thought that Austin Spare was a black magician and didn't want anything to do with him. So Aleister Crowley thought that Austin Osman Spare was a black magician. And the reason is because he was absolutely drawn to the chaotic, opposite, free-flowing nature of the darker side of the unconscious, the unknown side of the unconscious, as an artistic source. And you know, Crowley was far more of a control freak in the sense of that's why he got into magic, is to control things. And so abandoning himself like Austin Spare did to the primal, primeval, almost Lovecraftian, Clipothic, wild side of the untamed unconscious, is a very, very different thing. So if you're interested in following that darker route in that sense, and I mean that in a positive light sense in terms of it's all good work to dig through, then Austin Spare has some challenging writing and belief systems, and the alphabet of desire, which is his form of sigilization, is something that is very powerful. Okay, so hopefully that's answered those two questions. Now, I think there was just one other thing. Oh, signposting. Over the last couple of days, I've made sure that 3 of our books that were only on Kindle are now available in paperback. So that is Tarot Flip, Tarot Twist, and Tarot Inspire, which was just made available today. I spoke to Amazon earlier on today, and that's now available. It got slightly delayed, but that's now available. And so what we're going to do is I made 2 main signposting areas where we can continue our discussions and journeys without overlapping with all of the other things that we have got going. And that is our Use Saloon, which is a Facebook group. And if you are watching this video, then all right, okay. And Promethea is really excellent, really excellent. It's a beautiful description of the journey that we've done, and Alan Moore is obviously very, very influenced by Crowley's teachings, by the Kabbalah, and so on. And Promethea, I think book 4 in particular. But all of them, some of them have some incredible, in effect, path workings visualized as a graphic novel that are incomparable. They're really excellent. The one where they get to the abyss or Kether, you turn the page and it just whites out the page and things like that. It's just very beautiful and very powerful. I'd also suggest, Evan, you can read it online. Alan Moore wrote something called Fossil Angels, and it's a critique of armchair magicians, but he makes some very good points in it about a bit like I was making with Kabbalah here, that unless you're doing something with it, unless it is inspiring you to create things, to do things, to change your life and so on, then it's a waste of time and energy. And in fact, quite the opposite. It's even worse than a waste of time and energy pursuing any of these things. So yeah, Fossil Angels is a very powerful piece of writing, and I have met a lot of the people that he's critiquing, either directly or indirectly, and I entirely sympathize with his position in that essay. So right, that's where we're at with that. So yes, so Use Saloon is a Facebook group, and in that what I would intend for us to do is do some sort of book club type activities, so that we can pick particular books. Often it'll be those written by myself, either with Tali Goodwin, or future versions of the Magister with Charlotte Louise. All of these series of books, and we have a massive one that a whole group of us have been working on for the last 2 years. Daily we've been producing material for it, particularly 3 of us every single day for 2 solid years, and that's on a totally different subject than we've covered before, but one that has emerged within our magical order, and it's going to be the first publication really from the order itself, after a couple of years of daily work by a small group of us. So all of that will be covered in Yu's Inestimable reading room, if I can ever say inestimable. It should be an inestimable vestibule, but it is a reading room. And the other point that I made for signposting is my own page, marcuscatz.com. And on there I've now made sure that there's a link to Magica School, to the books, to the Crucible Club, the Order of Everlasting Day page, which I put some more material onto to explain what we do there, and Arcadia as well. So all of the main links to our biggest projects are all on my own page now, sort of to lead people off. I still have to work on my page since it got crashed a little while ago, but all of those things are linked from there. So again, 2 points of contact, either from Yu's social club or from my own page that splits off to all of the various projects that we do. So I've tried to condense them there, because obviously we don't want, if you're interested in alchemy, then please join Magica School and study the alchemy course there for a while. If you're interested in narrative storytelling with tarot, with surprises and things, then join Arcadia. That's about 10 years of planning and 2 solid years of writing. If you're interested in the Western Esoteric Industry System for real, then the Crucible Club is a 1-year course of study that we've tweaked over the last 4 or 5 years to get just right. And then that leads to the Order of Everlasting Day, which is where we do most of our actual ritual and magical work together as a networked and non-hierarchical order. And also it's a group for people who don't want to join groups, because none of us do. So we had to find ourselves a way of working that we could all work together in a group that isn't really a group, but does have the advantages of working in a group. So I'd like us to end that sort of signposted us off as you leave the airplane and go to your onward journeys. Then you know that you can always find us in Yu's Saloon on Facebook. Use Curious Saloon and Inestimable Reading Room. And everything is signposted from either there or my own personal site. So I'd like to finish by reading something that isn't uplifting, it isn't easy, but it is real. And I'd like to consider with you for a moment that if we have learned anything in this time, for me personally, it is the value of time, of authenticity, of imagination and attention. Where we place our attention in life is very important. It's the most important thing we can do, is place our attention to things and on things. And when we give our attention, we are spending our time. And if you give your attention to something that is inauthentic, you will never get that time back, and it will never build to anything. I was commenting early on, I was quoting the biblical saying that lest the Lord build it, they that build it in vain. And I think that's true if we consider, rather than a biblical Lord, the fact that our attention to our authentic connection to the universe is the most important thing in life. No matter what else you're doing, who you are, where you are, when you are, this is the most profound of secrets, carried and passed down through the ages, through the most unlikely of hands. And that attention has to be placed, I believe, to something you consider is authentic. And authentic is something that cannot be manufactured and it cannot be pretended. It cannot be Instagrammed, it cannot be tweeted, it cannot be found other than where it actually is. And so paying your attention to that, I think, is, for me, I would give you, if I was only to give one lesson, for me personally, it's the most useful pointer of our time. And the second thing is our imagination, to be able to be free to imagine whatever we want, a better future, a better self, a better anything, but we should be free to do that, because this is the only freedom that we have left. And it is really important to cultivate it, to protect it, to develop it, because at the end of the day, the universe is an act of inquiry. It is inquiring to itself, hey, what can I do? What am I? And we are part of that. And so we, as my teacher once said to me, you are the eyes, the ears, the taste, the feeling of the entire universe. So why not give it a fucking treat to remember? And that was a very important lesson that he gave me. And that leads me as a segue to our final reading, which is called Stirrings Still. Stirrings Still. And it does go back to, I wanted to tell you a brief story about where this piece comes from. It's written by Samuel Beckett, and it is a short piece. It will take me about less than 10 minutes to read. And the first time I saw it was in a newspaper. The full version of it was printed on a full newspaper broadsheet, and my teacher at the time, my first teacher in Western occultism, pinned it up on his door so that he could read just a few lines of it every day for several months, because it was like a rich chocolate that you just had to savor a little bit of it every day. And I used to work in the temple that was opposite that particular door where we built a temple, and I used to read a few lines myself every now and again, in order to really appreciate the perfect wording of this piece of writing, because it is a pure piece of writing that could not be written any other way. And it is about forgetting, it is about remembering, it is about being true, it is about life, and it is not necessarily just the light or the darkness. It's a mixture of all these things. And this piece of writing, I think, couldn't have been written any more perfectly. But it is an unusual piece of writing as a result, and unique in that. And there were two other things I wanted to mention just as background to this, is that my teacher also used to have a cartoon that was pinned to the other side of the door that we used to see every time we left the house, which was a picture of Moses, and he'd parted the Red Sea, and the Egyptians were coming and the Israelites were sort of behind Moses, and he was looking back at them, and they were all looking at him, and he was looking back as if, and the caption underneath it was, "What do you mean? It's a bit muddy." And that was the thing that we had to remember before we left the temple and left the house and go into the outer world, that you can perform miracles, but everyone will always complain that it's a bit muddy. So that was an earthing of the magic, and I would leave us with that lesson as well, that we can be real with this as well, even if we can part the Red Sea. No one's going to just praise you for doing so, they're just going to say it's a little bit muddy. And the final thing was that we used to call the temple the Chinese room. Whenever we used to refer to that particular temple, we'd always say, "Oh, well, we're going to work in the Chinese room this evening," or "Someone needs to tidy up the Chinese room." And people used to think it was some evocative sort of statement of it being like an opium den or a oriental mystery or something like that. But in fact, it was because when we were scrubbing down the walls, which took it was a very old building, and it took us about 3 months to really finish off the walls and straighten them out and stuff. And it was a very time-consuming process. Just before we inaugurated the temple, we decided to have a takeaway meal. We sat in the temple and we had a Chinese meal, and someone spilt a load of it on the brand new black and white checkered temple floor, and therefore it became christened the Chinese room. So again, sometimes there's a far more mundane explanation behind some of the mysticism and magic that actually goes on. But it was a fantastic temple, and we used it for a good 3 years, 4 maybe, and had people from around the world come and do workings with us, and that was about 20 something years ago now. But yes, so long live the Chinese room, and this from the door opposite of the Chinese room is called Stirring Still by Samuel Beckett. One night, as he sat at his table, head on hands, he saw himself rise and go. One night or day. For when his own light went out, he was not left in the dark. Light of a kind came from the one high window. Under it still the stool on which, till he could or would no more, he used to mount to see the sky. Why he did not crane out to see what lay beneath was perhaps because the window was not made to open, or perhaps because he could or would not open it. Perhaps he knew only too well what lay beneath and did not wish to see it again. So he would simply stand there high above the earth and see through the clouded pane the cloudless sky. Its faint and changing light, unlike any light he could remember from the days and nights when day followed hard on night and day and night. This outer light then, when his own went out, became his only light, till it in turn went out and left him in the dark, till it in turn went out. One night or day then, as he sat at his table, head on hands, he saw himself rise and go. First rise and stand clinging to the table, then sit again, then rise again and stand clinging to the table again, then go, start to go. On unseen feet, start to go, so slow that only change of place to show he went, as when he disappeared only to reappear later at another place again, then disappeared only to reappear later at another place again. So again and again disappeared again to reappear again at another place again. Another place in the place where he sat at his table, head on hands. The same place and table as when Dolly, for example, died and left him. As when others too in their turn, before and since. As when others would too in their turn and leave him till he too in his turn. Head on hands, half hoping when he disappeared again that he would not reappear again, and half fearing that he would not. Or merely wondering, or merely waiting to see if he would or would not, leave him or not alone again, waiting for nothing again. Seen always from behind, whithersoever he went, same hat and coat as of old when he walked the roads, the back roads. Now as one in a strange place seeking the way out, in the dark, in a strange place, blindly in the dark of night or day seeking the way out, to the roads, to the back roads. A clock afar struck the hours and half hours, the same as when, among others, Darley once died and left him. Strokes now clear as if carried by wind, now faint on the still air. Cries afar, now faint, now clear. Head on hands, half hoping when the hour struck that the half hour would not, and half fearing that it would not. Similarly, when the half hour struck, Similarly, when the cries a moment ceased, or merely wondering, or merely waiting to hear. There had been a time he would sometimes lift his head enough to see his hands. What of them was to be seen? One laid on the table and the other on the one, at rest after all they did. Lift his past head a moment to see his past hands, then lay it back on them to rest it too, after all it did. The same place as when left day after day for the roads, the back roads, returned to night after night, paced from wall to wall in the dark, the then fleeting dark of night, now as if strange to him seemed to rise and go, disappear and reappear at another place again, or the same, nothing to show, not the same, no wall toward which or further from, in the same place as when paced from wall to wall, all places as the same, or in another, nothing to show, not another, where never, rise and go in the same place as ever, disappear and reappear in another where never, nothing to show, not another where never, nothing but the strokes, the cries, the same as ever. Till so many strokes and cries since he was last seen that perhaps he would not be seen again, and so many cries since the strokes were last heard that perhaps they would not be heard again, then such silence since the cries were last heard that perhaps even they would not be heard again, perhaps thus the end, unless no more than a mere lull. Then all as before, the strokes and cries as before, and he as before, now there, now gone, now there again, now gone again. Then the lull again. Then all as before again. So again and again, and patience till the one true end to time and grief and self and second self his own. As one in his right mind, when at last out again, he knew not how he was not long out again when he began to wonder if he was in his right mind. For could one not in his right mind be reasonably said to wonder if he was in his right mind, and bring what is more his remains of reason to bear on this perplexity in the way he must be said to do if he is to be said at all? It was therefore in the guise of a more or less reasonable being that he emerged, and last he knew not how, into the outer world, and had not been there for more than 6 or 7 hours by the clock when he could not but begin to wonder if he was in his right mind. By the same clock whose strokes were heard times without number in his confinement as it struck the hours and half hours, and so in a sense at first a source of reassurance, till finally one of alarm, as being no clearer now than when in principle muffled by his 4 walls. And he sought help in the thought of one hastening westward at sundown to obtain a better view of Venus, and found it of none. Of the soul of the sound that of cries enliven earth his solitude, as lost to suffering he sat at his table, head on hands, the same was true. Of their whenceabouts, that is, of a clock and cries, the same was true. It is no more to be determined now than as was only natural then. Bringing to bear on all this his remains of reason, he sought help in the thought that his memory of indoors was perhaps at fault, and found it of none. Further to his disarray, his soundless tread, as when barefoot he trod the floor, so all ears from bad to worst, and in the end he ceased, if not to hear, to listen, and set out to look about him. Result, finally he was in a field of grass, which went some way, if nothing else, to explain his tread, and then a little later, as if to make up for this, some way to increase his trouble. For he could not recall no field of grass from even the very heart of which no limit of any kind was to be discovered, but always in some quarter or another some end in sight, such as a fence or other manner born from which to return. Nor on his looking more closely, to make matters worse, was this The short green grass he seemed to remember, eaten down by flocks and herds, but long and light grey in colour, verging here or there on white. Then he sought help in the thought that his memory of outdoors was perhaps at fault, and found it of none. So all eyes from bad to worse, till in the end he ceased if not to see, to look about him or more closely, and set out to take thought. To this end, for want of a stone on which to sit like Walter and cross his legs the best he could, was stop dead and stand stock still, which after a moment's hesitation he did, and of course sink his head as one deep in meditation, which after another moment of hesitation he did also. But soon weary of vainly delving in those remains, he moved on through the long hoar grass, resigned to not knowing where he was or how he got there, or where he was going or how he was going to get back to whence he knew not how he came. So on, unknowing and no end in sight, unknowing, and what is more, no wish to know, nor indeed any wish of any kind, nor therefore any sorrow, save that he would have wished the strokes to cease and the cries for good, and he was sorry that they did not. The strokes now faint, now clear, as if carried by the wind, but not a breath, but the cries now faint, now clear. So until stayed, when to his ears from deep within, oh how and here a word he could not catch it, were to end where never till then. Rest then before again, from not long to so long, that perhaps never again, and then faint from deep within, oh how and here that missing word again, it were to end where never till then. In any case, whatever it might be to end, and so on, was he not already, as he stood there all bowed down, and to his ears faint from deep within again and again, oh how something, and so on, was he not so far as he could see already there where never till then? For how could even such a one as he, having once found himself in such a place, not shudder to find himself in it again, which he had not done, nor having shuddered seek help in vain in the thought so called, that having somehow got out of it, then he could somehow get out of it again, which he had not done either. There then, or this time, where never till then, and so far as he could see in every direction when he raised his head and opened his eyes, no danger or hope, as the case might be, of his ever getting out of it. Was he then now to press on regardless, now in one direction and now in another, or on the other hand stir no more, as the case might be, that is, as that missing word might be, which, if to warn such as sad or bad, for example, then of course, in spite of all the one, and if the reverse, then of course the other, that is stir no more. Such and much more, such the hubbub in his mind so called, till nothing left from deep within, but only ever fainter, oh to the end, no matter how, no matter where, time and grief and self so called, oh all to end. That's a rather beautiful and brilliant and perfectly written piece of authentic life that it was my pleasure to read from my teacher, and I pass on to you, O original order of the online hermits. Long may we journey, and we will see each other in the saloon at some point. And I look forward to seeing you there. There'll be something happening in there tomorrow as we go along, and we'll be able to ask questions, catch up with each other and everything there. So we have now, ladies and gentlemen, touched down. The doors are opening. Set doors to unlock, and I wish you pleasant trips in your forward journeys and connecting flights. Bye for now.